We did do She-Ra, which is kind of like a third season of He-Man, because He-Man was in She-Ra quite a bit. We did quite a few crossovers with her.
With He-Man popularity at an all-time high in 1984, a companion line of toys and a spin-off animated series were quickly planned. Aimed at the market for young girls, She-Ra, Princess of Power debuted in syndication in the fall of 1985. Later that year, a Christmas special was aired, uniting the two popular heroes and their casts. But besides the action and adventures and distinctive filmation look, both the He-Man and She-Ra shows shared one important element: the need to teach children important lessons. So, cozy up in a chair and join us to explore the holidays and morals of
He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
It was exciting to sort of be involved with bringing She-Ra, out for everybody and introducing a whole sort of other side to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, this other side. And even though She-Ra is a woman's character, we weren't talking frou-frou, silly little things. She was very strong, independent-minded and woman who was dealing with all sorts of the same kinds of issues that He-Man was.
She-Ra was really my baby. I really enjoyed She-Ra because I came up with most of what was on She-Ra. The Bible, the plot, and we went in a totally different direction than we were going with He-Man.
I remember the recording of the shows and having, He-Man and She-Ra in there talking together and seeing them come together was fun. It really sort of, you felt like you were on the road to doing something really special. There was some chemistry was going on here. And the Christmas special gave us an opportunity to have them to come together. And that was, and on top of that, seeing Skeletor trying to be this nice guy, it really made the whole show a lot of fun. It put a new spin that we all really enjoyed a lot.
Well, I think you're feeling the Christmas spirit, Skeletor. It makes you feel good.
Well, I don't like to feel good. I like to feel evil. Oh.
The only thing I remember about the He-Man She-Ra Christmas special was the scene where the dog licks the face of Skeletor, and Skeletor goes, "Ugh, can't stand kisses, can't stand love." It was the moment that you really knew Skeletor was really not such a bad guy, because you really thought he really liked that puppy. Skeletor and Hordak, bad. Hordak was a bad guy. Skeletor had sensitivity. I like Skeletor. And Skeletor was a star. Everybody, if you had had He-Man without Skeletor, it wouldn't have been much of a show.
Female She-Ra. Just a minute. What about the way He-Man handles you, Bone Brain? Bone Brain? Why, you miserable excuse for a villain.
When Skeletor, there was this little puppy or something, and this puppy was always licking him. I just remember when we were recording that, we were in hysterics in the booth, seeing horrible Skeletor, being all sweet and cute. It really was funny. I remember that. And it's kind of one of those things you had to be there to really laugh, but it was funny at the time.
No! Stop licking my face, you dratted dog! Get away from me! You're drowning me! Get off!
They did a Christmas special, the He-Man She-Ra Christmas special, and did some work on it. That show was one, if I remember correctly, that people got little pieces of. There were major, it was assigned to certain people, but we all did a little bit on it. He-Man would have been more my kind of thing at first, I thought, because it was more of the testosterone kind of a figure than the female character. But I got to really like the She-Ra shows because it was different. Another thing about it, He-Man was in a lot of She-Ra shows.
Come on, She-Ra, we must stop him.
Robots, get them!
Hang on, Arco!
We're on our way!
I did some animation on the Christmas special, and it was fun combining He-Man and She-Ra, and because there was a sort of like a brother and sister kind of relationship, and I remember that we had one cleanup artist who used to work with us named Dory Herrick, And Dory is a wonderful old line feminist where she always made sure that no matter how She-Ra would jump through the sky or fall down or wrestle things, that little mini skirt of hers never flipped up. Like, she always maintained her modesty, even while, wrestling octopuses and all kinds of creatures.
The Christmas special, I remember watching it as a kid. I didn't see it until fairly late. I guess it was produced in 1985. I've learned since. I don't think I saw it until about 1989. Of course, by then I lost my vision long before that. Enjoyed it. It was, it's one of the goofier episodes, but it was fun, and it was neat to see something new at that point, and enjoyed it. And I watch it every year at Christmas.
One of the things that I love most doing at Filmation was the music. I'm in a duo called Odd Squared. And we are just now getting our first album on the internet, and it sort of picks up in the themes of trying to say good things with music. Music's been my love, so there's nothing more that I can say than, if you want to follow up with what I'm doing, come check me out and listen to what I've got going on, because my dad gave me the opportunity to do all this, and I thank him most of all. There was a song in the Christmas special, now that I think about it, and as a matter of fact, I did write that song.
We've got just the right setting for my new Christmas song. Let's try it.
Love and caring, peaceful bliss.
It's just sort of starting to play through my head. I remember the bells patch that I was using for it, and I loved the opportunity to write and play music, and I sang that song too. Whenever I got a chance to do that, my dad would let me. So I do remember writing a song for the Christmas special, and it was very sweet, as I recall, and I'm gonna watch this DVD so I can see it again.
In today's story, Orko is faced with a very difficult decision.
While the He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special taught children important lessons about the spirit of Christmas, each episode of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was constructed to teach a moral lesson. Because founder Lou Scheimer felt these pro-social messages were important, Filmation had begun tagging educational lessons onto the end of their shows in the early 1970s. Now, story editor Arthur Nadell and his writers made certain that these morals became a regular part of the charm of Eternia, for parents and children.
Filmation always wanted to incorporate pro-social values into their programs, not just He-Man, but really everything they did. It was always about the stories, and always, what can we teach children? And in fact, Arthur was the one who came up with putting the 30-second tag on the end of the stories. Every story had this is what we learned today. And if we didn't learn anything from the story itself, that was, kids, you gotta eat your vegetables because it's really good for you. So they were very concerned and very responsible and conscientious about that.
He-Man, Fat Albert, and we had the only network shows that did that at all. ISIS, Shazam, and they worked, and it was good, and the audience enjoyed it and wanted more and more of it. And stuff that was integral to the show, and then the moral at the end was a reaffirmation of that.
Lou loved them. Lou loved the morals, and Arthur, they both loved the morals. It was because they felt that besides entertaining children, we should give them something good to go along with it. They felt the morals were something good to give.
Arthur Nadell, who was in charge of the writer, was a very interesting person. I'll say one thing: when people would say that He-Man was supposedly violent or was a toy-based show, if you look to Arthur Nadell, you can see that really wasn't the case. Arthur Nadell would never have anything violent happen on He-Man. It was against his nature.
In today's story, I sure was busy. Boy, did that hurt. Ramming things may look like fun, but it really isn't. Trying to use your head the way I do is not only dangerous, it's dumb.
There's a lot of restrictions in children's television, and sort of the key phrase that you're taught early to avoid is what's called imitatable antisocial behavior. That's the sort of intellectual expert's phrase. And so there's a scene in He-Man. There's like a stock scene, which means they use it again and again, where He-Man punches right into the camera. And that was kind of pushing the envelope, because you don't see what he's hitting and you don't see the point of impact, and that's good, because You don't want to see the actual graphic hit, but you do see the fact that he's punching somebody. And the fact that this was a particular piece of footage that was reused a lot in the series, in retrospect, I'm surprised. I think maybe we would have been wiser in terms of getting heat on the show if we had not had that piece of footage, although kids loved it. I mean, that's the thing, is the thing that adults don't want kids to see are the very things they love the most, and that's always the challenge in writing for children. One other little thing that I think you'll find interesting. You know, Arthur Nadell, who was the person in charge of the scripts, was extremely conscientious about these bad behaviors. And one I'll never forget is I had a scene where He-Man crawled out on a tree branch to save an animal. And what happened is the branch broke and he fell. And I'll never forget, Arthur objected to the scene because He-Man actually broke a tree branch. So we were unbelievably conscientious in many ways about trying to have He-Man never destroy things, not be a violent character, and be the best role model he could possibly be.
Today, He-Man had to decide whether or not to chop down a tree.
I enjoyed the He-Man show because it always did have a good moral to it if you would stop and listen or pay attention to it. I took a little offense at the criticism from some people that said they were parents and they felt that their kids were being influenced by all this violence and everything, but they weren't paying attention as far as I was concerned, because as the writers did, Arthur and Robbie just always had a tag there on the end and explained the reasoning different things happened, and the good and the bad comparatively. And I was proud of that. And if anybody ever argued with me that it's a violent show just designed to sell a toy, the heck with you, or to Hades with you.
I know that Lou Scheimer was very proud of the fact that even though He-Man was this barbarian covered in armor and waving this huge sword around, you weren't allowed to chop anybody, you weren't allowed to stab or behead or flay or gut, or the sword, usually you cut the drapes and he falls on somebody. Or He-Man's favorite thing was to pick people. He'd always pick Beastman up and throw him 3 miles, and there'd always be a bale of hay or a mud puddle somewhere where he'll always land in the mud puddle safely. It was always he was always trying to be an action show, but that was non-violent.
One of the hallmarks, I think, of all Filmation stuff was that there was attention paid to not just the entertainment of the show, but that there was something worthwhile. It didn't have to beat you over the head with a moral or something, but you came away a little enriched. And that He-Man was carrying that tradition was a really important and special thing. I think that really sets He-Man apart from all of these shows, that are big superheroes, beating up on everybody. And the funny thing about He-Man is he really didn't beat up on anybody. He had this big sword and stuff, but it was really more to scare people, not hurt people, into doing things that were the right sort of thing. So the morals, I thought, was a great thing. And not only that, I thought that it wasn't something that was thrown in after the fact. It was really an integral part of the process of the stories. A lot of times you can see shows where they'll stick in hey, brush your teeth at the end of the show. The morals in the He-Man show, they were part of the story, and I felt really good about that.
In He-Man and Masters of the Universe, it was very important, and at the end of each episode, there were the morals of the show, what this show was trying to do besides entertain. And that's where I think He-Man and Masters got, as my friend Muhammad Ali would say, that staying power, because morals are, to me, extremely important. And even today, where we're going around wondering what they are, what is good, what is bad, are you born evil? All of these are morals. These are philosophical issues. These are morals that need to be taught, need to be ingrained in one. I was always very proud that there were these. I felt they were very important, and I still do. And obviously they were, because the show is still being honored and has that swell of fans.
Look at how the series works. It tends to have a real good sense of ethics about it. Morality is a different situation. I always consider those two different things. Ethics means asking questions, being aware of situations, and being an informed citizen. And oddly enough, for as much as it was a silly show in some respect, the He-Man series really had a good sense of ethics about it. And often I thought the ethics were more important than the morals you tack on to the bottom of the show.
Today, I want to talk to you about courage. Now, courage not only means being brave in the face of danger, it also means having the strength to say no when your friends are trying to talk you into doing something you know is wrong.
In terms of the morals of the show, you know, one was always walking a tightrope because you didn't want it to be sanctimonious. You know, the kids are going to just zone out, and I think that was more something for the adults, for the parents, than for the kids. Kids, if you write a hero who's acting nobly, if you have friends who stand up for each other in the face of great odds, I mean, those are the things you want to impart to your children. Those are the things you want to live by yourself. That you don't bail when things get tough. That you're there for the people who need you. That you live a life of emotional commitment. And I think that's what He-Man speaks to. I think it's what we all want to work on in our writing.
It was the fun aspects of the series that stood out the most for me. It was not a deadly serious series. No children were going to be harmed in watching it. The characters were colorful. The villains were mean-looking, but not really scary. And there was a moral at the end of every episode. And children watching it actually, came away from it feeling better, not more violent. And I like that about it.
The social messages, the morals at the end of every episode, I thought they were done well at the time. I learned a lot as a kid from those. You can look back on them kind of, now, and they're kind of hokey, and it's 20 years later, and they don't really do that on cartoons anymore. But they were perfect for the shows. I think they were sending good messages to kids.
I really liked the moral end of it. I mean, that's a big thing to me. I really do believe that what you put out there is what your society will eventually emulate. It was a hopeful show. I don't like cynical shows. I really don't. I think that's one of the problems that we're developing in society today is there's a hard edge to things, and I don't like that. And I certainly didn't want that to be a pervasive thing with my kids. There's no question. It had an innocence about it that I think I like very much about it. It was a rudimentary show. There were a lot of aspects to it. There were obviously very limited animation and things like that, but I think there was a lot of soul in the show, and I think it plays well. I think the reason my sons love to watch it years later is because of qualities like that.
Today's story was about love, but a very special kind. It was about the love a parent has for a child, and I bet that's the strongest kind of love there is, because for one thing, there's just about nothing that can change it, no matter what.
I think the most wonderful thing about He-Man was that the stories were generally sweet. They had a lesson behind them. And for the first time in the history of children's animation, it was a new show every day, 5 days a week. The children could come home from school every day and know that it would be on every day. It would be a show that when it was over, they could feel better about themselves, and that when they came home the next day, it would be on again. And it provided a consistency for children to come home to and enjoy and help lend meaning and joy to their lives.
At the time that He-Man was out on television, I just happened to coincide with a time that I was moving around a lot as a kid. We moved probably 5 times in that short span of time. And so, when you don't have a lot that is the same, what is the same becomes more important. So it was like carrying along sort of an old friend, as bad as that may sound, to have the show to rely on. And the pro-social values of it and the morals of it sort of fit in with my childhood morality. And there was not a lot of that out there for me, moving from school to school with the way that I was treated, being the new kid all the time in the different schools. So it really resonated with me in that way.
As we were producing the shows, we were all aware that this was a factor in making the shows. So we also strived to make the shows have some moral lessons in them, to have some sweetness, to have adventure, but also a wholesome aspect to them, because this is what children would be coming home to after school every day. And that aim, I think, is embedded into the shows themselves. And so when these cartoons are watched again over the years, I think that spirit will remain in them and will be felt by people who watch them years and years from now.
Another person who was integral to the development of the He-Man morals was Stanford professor Donald F. Roberts. His introduction into the annals of He-Man history came from one of his memorable students.
The funny thing about He-Man was when it came time for my dad to do that show, I was still at Stanford finishing my senior year, and he was having a real hard time figuring out who to be an educational consultant on the series. And I was taking a communication and children class at Stanford at the time, and thought it would be really great idea to get my professor involved in this.
I had worked for years with Dr. Gordon Berry at UCLA, and CBS hired him as their in-house educational advisor, so he couldn't do anything for us on the outside for any show that was not on CBS. And as Erica told you earlier, she was going to school at Stanford.
I thought I had a perfect professor, and I also figured, gee, wouldn't that be great for me to have my professor working for my dad? Ooh la la! But believe me, I worked really hard in that class, and I deserved the A I got.
I was teaching a course that I've been teaching for years about children in media. And it was the first day of class. I was giving some background on the kind of things that we would cover and look at, and one of the things I mentioned was educational television. When I gave that talk, I mentioned that I thought a show called Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids was just about the best thing that had ever been done for commercial television in terms of educational things for kids. At the end of that class, a young woman came up and introduced herself. She actually had tears in her eyes. She said, "Did you really mean that about Fat Albert?" And I said, "Yeah, I think it's a great show." And she then explained that her name was Erica Scheimer. Her father had produced that show, and she, in fact, had even been a couple of the voices in that show. That, I think, was the first connection. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, she said to me, "Professor Roberts, my parents are coming to town and I want them to meet you." And we went out to dinner, my wife and I, Lou Scheimer and his wife, Erica, and started talking about some of the kinds of things I do. And Lou Scheimer said to me, "Gee, I would very much like to talk to you further."
She introduced me to Don Roberts, and he was terrific. I mean, at first I said, "You got a chance to make a difference in children's programming." He says, "But you won't really listen to me. It's just you'll use my..." I said, "No." I said, "We actually let you read the scripts, make suggestions, and we change things." He said, "You really change things?" I said, "Absolutely." And one of the first things we gave him was a script where Orko has a food fight.
Now, there are 4 of me. I'll bet I'm 4 times as powerful a magician.
I can't remember what show it was, but Orko was throwing food around. Oh, I knew that wasn't a very good idea. And he knew that it was a very bad idea. And when he suggested we change it around so that Orko had some reason for being upset and what happened as a result of that, and we made a change on the spot. And he and Arthur Nadell were talked on a daily basis. And I could just see Don glowing with the fact that here was an academic who had a voice, that had a reason for having that voice heard, and somebody who listened to him and actually changed things because of what he said. And he was a joy to work with.
Somebody had stole the mother dragon's egg, and this was creating rampage and so forth. And there was the character Orko, and Orko was kind of a comic magic character. He was always getting into trouble. In this particular episode, he cloned himself 2 or 3 times, and then they had something like a big food fight or some crazy, crash things together and make it very comical kind of scene. And I looked at it and I went back to Lou on the phone and said, I would change it in the following ways, and talked about if Orko is going to clone himself, let them start to get in each other's way, and then let them figure out something we'll call cooperation, and they'll learn to work together. And then you take that theme, and in the climactic scene when people are trying to get into Skeletor's castle and get the mother dragon's egg back, one person tries and another person tries and nothing's being successful, and suddenly Orko comes in and says, "I've learned about a new thing called cooperation," and they all work together and they win. So I explained that that's what I would do if it were me working on the script. Lou immediately patched me through to Arthur Nadell and 2 or 3 other people and had me repeat everything. And at the end of my repetition, he said, "We're going to change the script, that's what it's going to be. And Don, we want to talk about you doing some more script work for us." And we hung up the phone, and I thought, that's cool. That's the first time anyone's ever taken my advice. About an hour later, the phone rang, and it was Arthur Nadell, whom I had only met by telephone. And he said, "Professor Roberts, that's really a very interesting and intriguing way to change the script, and I like it, and Lou's right, it'll be a much better script, but you should know something. We were at such and such a stage, I think they were actually doing storyboards, and your changes are going to cost us around $100,000. And that's when I sort of knew, wow, I'm in the real world. But that was sort of the beginning. And we agreed that I would look at the materials, and the trade-off for me was the opportunity to take an action-adventure show and see if we could do pro-social things with it. Everyone said you couldn't. A lot of people still say you can't. I think you could. I think we did, and I think you can. And so we had an arrangement whereby for every script we did, I looked at a premise, an outline, and a minimum of 2 drafts. Sometimes I looked at 3 or 4. And what happened in those days, this was before we were using the internet the way we use it now, they were faxing stuff to me or FedExing stuff to me every couple of days. And the deal was I would look at that, I would make notes, I would turn the material around in 48 hours, and then as soon as I'd turned it around, I would get on the phone because they were working on a tight schedule, and at least give the highlights of my notes. I got scripts. I got premises and scripts from writers. And my job was to say, is there a concept in here that can be highlighted, emphasized, reshaped to teach children some kind of a pro-social message, some kind of element of character, some kind of element of behavior, something that we want our kids to know. And so my task was saying, here's the characters, they're a given. Here's the world, that's a given. Now it's the story, and how can I work with the story to emphasize the kinds of things that I would hope kids would learn. The approach I wanted to take with that program was that whatever the lesson was about is what the show should be about. What I wanted to do was make sure that the story in He-Man told the lesson. It's a concept of education on the storyline. In many ways, I was hoping that the kids didn't even realize that we were really very determinedly trying to teach them something. I just wanted them to take it as the natural course of events. So that if we did a script on cooperation, or a script on honesty, or a script on responsibility or perseverance, the story was about that particular quality, that particular characteristic. You could find a way to work with these things metaphorically, and then to the extent that metaphor is difficult for young children to understand, we could sharpen it up in that 30-second tag. That was the beauty of having a tag to reinforce the message that the story had tried to tell. In that sometimes you tell a story obliquely, sometimes you tell it with a metaphor, but when we came back to the tag, He-Man or Orko or Tila or someone could say, you know, when He-Man said this or did that, here's what he was really saying, and you could reinforce the lesson that way. I did not write the tags myself. Usually it would come out of a writer, and to the extent that it needed massaging, I would massage it. And the first thing I thought to myself was, don't tell them what to do. It was a process of exploring and each of us figuring out what the other wanted. It took a little while, maybe, I don't know, the first 20 or 25 episodes, but pretty soon you began to realize they were getting it. Suddenly I started getting premises and outlines and first draft scripts where I didn't need to say anything. I'd say, gee, this is about cheating and the consequences, and it's great, and push it up this way and go off with it.
Getting Don Roberts involved in the He-Man scripts was really fun for me because I used to be able to bug him if he'd done his homework. And that gave us a very sort of special little camaraderie, and I really enjoyed that a lot. I love that. I did. I truly love being able to, hey, Don, did you do your homework?
I have seen a lot of the fan mail that we originally got on that from children and, more importantly, from parents and from psychiatrists saying, you know, we applaud the way you're talking to them about honesty, about perseverance, about respect for their elders, the kinds of issues that we dealt with. My child is actually mouthing these things back to me. Well, the reason I think that's happening was because the stories were good enough. These were fun, action-packed, engaging stories. If you were to walk into my office, you find frames from a number of the shows I've worked on, and I have several He-Man frames in there. And it's remarkable the number of 20-year-olds who say, oh, that's Orko, wow. How come you have He-Man in your office? I still get that response. A lot of kids grew up with it. One of the reasons that I have those pictures in my office is that I'm proud of having worked on it. I made a difference. In many ways, I have said to my wife, you know, I probably made more of a difference with some of the changes and some of the kinds of things that I made happen in those scripts than I've made with a lot of the journal articles that I've ever published. I reached a bigger audience, and I certainly had a more direct impact on young children. I'm proud of that show. I'm very proud of that show.
Roberts wasn't the only one pleased with the moral elements of He-Man. Although it had detractors during its run, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe received support from churches, and even a coalition of mothers who were angry that the show was removed from the local TV station. Today, the show's creators remember the series and its values with pride.
Of all the shows I think I was involved with, I was proudest of that show more than anything else. And I've met so many people over the years say, He-Man, you were connected with He-Man? Oh, I grew up on that. And gee, what a warm feeling that is.
Am I happy to have been a part of the show? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You know, for all that it was not Shakespearean drama, you know, I think that there's a lot of good things to say about it. You know, it had a very positive, a pro-social kind of attitude about life. And it's nice to be associated with a thing like that. You know, I liked it, and I still like it, and I'm proud to be a member of that particular fraternity.
It's 25 years ago, and people still remember it. I mean, how many other shows were around then that people care about?
Doing He-Man was an uplifting experience for me. It was the most successful show we ever worked on. I enjoyed every moment of it. I loved the characters and what they represented. I loved what they did for youngsters because the audience knew it was right. I knew it was right. The guys who were working on it knew it was right. Even Tataranowitz and Cito knew it was right. I'm not too sure about Tataranowitz.
I think the legacy of He-Man was that He-Man was a character who always tried to do good. He set a good example for children. He did heroic things without being overtly violent. He always did it clean and I think it set a good example, and it resonated with kids in a way a lot of the other shows didn't.
I feel satisfied with the fact that fans have kept this alive, because I have this feeling of a legacy, and I believe that what we do, we have to stay faithful. And that's what I like about Filmation. We were trying to do good things. We weren't trying to get away with stuff and, you know, like Arthur wouldn't let us kill somebody off, which was the right decision. Kids don't need to worry about that. It feels good that we did it, and it mattered enough that people want to watch these shows, that kids have grown up and they remember it fondly, and it affected the way they do things and how they think about life, and that they're still dedicated to it, because that's what it's all about in the long run, is you remember what was important to you when you were young, and you hold on to that kind of thing.
Today's story was about something more precious, more valuable than gold or silver. It's called friendship.
I know that He-Man was a good show, and it was number one important. That was always number one important. And people may have thought, you know, a little lame being all this good stuff, but you know what? It's a better world for it.
I got a script, a first draft script, in which everything is just moving along smoothly and wonderfully, and then I hit the stage direction, and the stage direction went something like, suddenly He-Man's brow furrows, he gets really angry, he pulls out his sword and he chops off a minute text about everybody's head and walks through I mean, they just made the bloodiest scene on earth to get my response. That scene did not show up. It was never meant to show up. It was just the writers playing with Don Roberts.
I would have liked to have seen He-Man tell kids to remember to change the newspaper underneath your parakeet, and keep the car door window open slightly when you go into a store so that your cat or dog can doesn't get too hot, or it's just the little tags at the end where we just have a little moral message like today we learned that Orko shouldn't stick his face in a fan. The other famous thing is that whenever you always have the guards that are watching over something. There's always 2 sentries at the gate, and the bad guys come up and zap the sentries. Well, we always used to get the note, don't make them look dead. So you'd have them quivering on the ground. So they're supposed to look stunned, but not totally deceased.
He-Man obviously was primarily an action show, but I think what differentiated it from others of its genre and why it has resonated for so long and so deeply is it was about family. It was about a family of characters that really cared about each other, and it had a moral tone. It had a lesson and a message that underlied all the action.
When Filmation created the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe syndicated cartoon series, they were faced with adding personality and history to the popular series of toys. What made He-Man, Battle Cat, Teela, and Orko heroic? What dastardly evils were schemed by Skeletor, Evil Lyn, and Beastman? Here's your chance to learn about the heroes and villains of He-Man
and the Masters of the Universe.
There were so many characters rolling across He-Man that besides, there were what we call regular characters and then characters that just popped in. And you realize you can't show 14, 15 people at the same time and have a story that you can tell in half an hour. So you concentrate on 1 or 2 of them, and you get what's really at the heart of those characters out, and you tell a story about what is at the heart of those characters. What's around it is chrome and sheer chutzpah, stupid jokes, whatever you want to call it, but what the heart of the story is always what are the characters doing, and how does it affect them, and how do they develop?
This is Battle Cat. And I am He-Man.
He-Man was sort of a fun character to write. He was sort of he was almost like the cop in the show. He was the one who kind of kept the show moving, and was a show that everything sort of revolved around. Good guy, good character. You couldn't play him too tough though, because otherwise people would complain about it. Like the toy company or the producers would say, no, he's got too much of an edge. You got to keep him kind of straight.
The only real power comes from inside Skeletor. From courage, honor, and other things you wouldn't understand.
Well, we did Shazam, and I really liked the relationship between Mentor and Billy Batson. It was wholesome. It was legitimate. He-Man is really 2 people. I mean, he's a normal human being and a superhero. Superman was not. Superman was always Superman. I mean, if you shot Superman while he was dressed up like Clark Kent, the bullet didn't hurt him. But if you hit He-Man while he was Prince Adam, he was in he was in bad shape. So it made him unique, and it was appropriate because the child is vulnerable. But once the child says the magic word, he's become something else.
From the get-go, he was a great hero. He grabbed children. They loved this idea of being able to just simply say, I have the power, and be transformed. It's what being a 5- and 6-year-old is about, trying to be transformed. And the way he got created in that show, he was a caring, gentle person. He would frequently try to look for ways other than violence to solve a problem. Skeletor, the evil villain, always pushed him up against the wall, but it wasn't He-Man going out searching for the battles. It was He-Man confronting Skeletor as a last resort. So I thought he was a great hero. And it's a good body. I tell my grandchildren that, in fact, they used me for the model for the body, but my grandchildren have yet to believe or accept that.
These people don't know what fighting is. I won't be the one who teaches them. There must be another way. I won't fight you for the sword, Raybar.
I have great feelings about He-Man because I think I had a crush on him. I thought that he was just a really great character. He was a great guy. And prior to, I think, Masters of the Universe, many of these are action heroes really didn't have much character to them. And He-Man was a feeling guy. He and Tila, you always thought, might end up getting together at some point. In Like Father, Like Daughter, he didn't save her per se in some condescending way, but he was out there helping her in the very end. And that is a true person.
I like drawing He-Man the best, just because, I could use all that art instruction, the different anatomy classes, and, things that you spent so much money on. Now I had a chance to actually utilize it all.
I like drawing He-Man. I like drawing Prince Adam. I liked his hair. We all had these funny ways of drawing the characters. So you could always tell who storyboarded what episode by, how they drew the characters. And I used to draw He-Man and Prince Adam like he looked like Dudley Do-Right. I gave him this chin with a dimple in it and crazy kind of hair, that Prince Valiant kind of haircut. So he looked like Dudley Do-Right in my episodes. It was hard to take him seriously.
I told you to quit yelling for help. Now we got the whole jungle after us.
Just remember who got the sword.
There's the corridor.
The character Orko was a delightful relief within a lot of the heavy adventures that were going on. It was, whenever he came on, you just had to laugh, you had to smile. He was just delightful. I mean, the dialogue we had for him, from the writers was tremendous. Just out of the blue, he'd say the craziest things.
I believe Orko was originally Hal Sutherland's idea, and my recollection is he came to me with this idea of a character that we couldn't see his mouth because that would really help with the animation, and that he would float, and that would help with the animation. And I think that sort of physical idea was born from Hal, and I recall Hal and I working together to sort of come up with this idea of sort of a comic relief character of Orko. And I originally first named this character Gorpo, and I liked that name a lot, and we submitted it to Mattel, and they had problems with it. But there was another problem with it which didn't occur to me and really should have, and I'm embarrassed. But if you think of the G that would have been on his costume, one of the things animation frequently does, at Filmation at least, was flop the animation, where they would animate the scene one way and then flop it around and use it the other way. And if you flop the G, it doesn't work. You have to use a symmetrical letter like an O or an A or a T where you can turn it around. And so that was another reason to change it from Gorpo to Orko.
Orko had to exist. He was the child that was around all the time. We didn't have very many youngsters in the show. But Orko was everybody's youngster. Orko, and anybody could be Orko. He had that face that you never saw. We took his hat off once. It was a love story, but only from the back.
What did Orko look like under his hat? You know what? We did a drawing of that, and he looked like a little elf. I know that some of the artists had a drawing, and he looked like a big-eyed, little, pointy-eared, elf, and nothing very special. But it was just like the rule of his people. They only showed face when they met somebody they really liked, and Orko met Driel, the little girl, and showed face to her, and that showed that he really liked her. I thought that was kind of cool, and it was cool that we had the drawing floating around of what Orko looked like underneath his mask, and he just looked like kind of like what you'd think. It's sort of like the end of South Park when Kenny takes off his hood and he just looks like another little kid.
It seems to me if I had that kind of magical power, I would say, I want the lower half of my torso back. It ends here, where this frame approximately ends. And no wonder his voice was high. He could be very annoying in this show, but used for comic effect, he could be very good.
Orko, everyone loved. largely because he was a cute little character and he was voiced by Lou Scheimer. And so we always got a kick out of that, and Lou had a great sense of humor of our teasing him about the way he may have read a line or the line that he was saying. Also, as an editor, the cool thing about Orko is he had no mouth. So you could put almost any line over his animation. And he was never out of sync because there was no lip movement. And it's just wonderful to have a few characters in every series that don't have lip movements, because you can sync up anything, put anything in there. So we could just take a scene of Orko just hovering for a long time if we're short on a show and just put it in there and let's have him hover for another 10 seconds. The writers will write something, we'll put something in there, and Lou would go, that's great, yeah, I'll say this or that and this or that. So Orko was a great, what they call a rubber band for an editor, and you could shorten or lengthen his scenes because there was no mouth.
My favorite was, of course, Orko. He was the quickest to draw. His face was blank. He had eyes. He floated. He didn't walk. There was no discernible features, and he would get scrunched up and crawl around and fly and do all kinds of great things. So he was the best. I was always working on my animation, so whenever a nice Orko crunch, flatten out, and pancake maneuver was called for, I was happy to get it across my desk.
I also like working with Orko because he was the comedy relief, and then you could do some more squashy, stretchy things with him, which was, it was fun to get the contrast. You weren't always just doing the muscle man kind of scenes. And then in the other series as well, throughout the He-Man series and the other series, they were always throwing in these comical relief characters that usually got the most fun scene. Those usually became the most fun scenes to do because those guys got to do a little more wacky stuff, and those were kind of a little treat to get to do.
Well, every comedian's got to have a sidekick. All the shows always had to have some little critter that was kind of like a comic relief. And you see that format in everything you see on television and the movies. There's always that little comic relief character. The studio had problems designing them sometimes. They kind of ran out of ideas of how to make up these little critters that flew around or whatever. Sometimes they'd start taking dragon tails and other animals' heads and just trying different combinations to see if they could get a new character to work in that capacity.
Hey, I'm a magician. This stuff won't work on me.
The kids loved it. They thought it was really cute to have that little character flying around and getting into mischief or saving the day.
Despite the fact that he had no feet and that he floated and that he was obviously from somewhere else, I think I felt closer to him than I did to any of the other characters. So I liked Orko. He was okay. He taught me how to antic. I think perhaps Orko was a lot smarter than he pretended, because he was always getting into and out of things by himself, and he could do that magic.
Orko was my favorite character because he was relatively funny, or at least I could make him funny, and he was a kid, and after all, our audience for the most part were kids, and he can do a lot of physical things in his animation. So to me, Orko was, of course, the more interesting person to write for, other than, of course, Skeletor.
I hated Orko. I'm sorry, I hated Orko. I didn't understand him. He was easy to draw, but he was damn annoying. I'm sorry. There was like that little thing that went Beely, Beely, Beely in Buck Rogers, I think it was. And Orko was just as annoying with the little scarf. I think Orko was a ghost with a clown fetish.
My favorite female character obviously was Tila. I think I related to her. I think we were maybe not the exact same age, but I did relate to that. And I related to the point that she wanted to do more, and was society holding her back, or she was supposed to be wearing, proper shoes and proper underwear, whatever it is that one wears when they're a woman. If you're a strong woman, it doesn't mean you're not a female and feminine. My favorite character was Tila. I did relate to her, and she was, the star, if you would, of that first episode that I was given. So I still have fond memories of Tila. I still feel that she's part of me, or I'm part of her.
I probably had a crush on Tila. I suppose I generally do develop crushes on female characters that I edit over a period of years, and so she's the one that I remember the most.
Tila was an interesting character because we wanted to portray a woman who was a strong female role model as a protagonist. And not just strong, but I mean kick-ass, tough. And, this was sort of the tail end of the first wave of the women's lib movement, and there was sort of that whole political correctness thing about women can do what men can do, and that's that was great. I mean, we supported that, and I think we try to portray her the same way we portray a man in the same circumstance who'd been brought up by a sort of tough drill sergeant father and was in charge of the Royal Guard and had something to prove. And sometimes she was too impulsive and too cocky and got herself in trouble. And I think that's a genderless trait, and I think that's what made her a really fun character.
I'm thinking about going to the Darklands to see how I can get along by myself for a few days.
Man-at-Arms was really the father figure. I mean, the king was around there every once in a while, but Man-at-Arms was the guy who raised him, who taught him to do the martial arts. Tila, you knew, was the love interest that you knew. We created a show called Hero, Son of He-Man, where Hero was the child that Tila and He-Man ended up having. It would have been a really good show.
All things considered, probably Man-at-Arms was the most serious character that we had. He was a father figure for Tila. He was a very serious character. And whenever we needed someone to anchor the emotional storyline, we went to those two, because they were the least comical, the most well-rounded, the most broad spectrum of emotions. And they were also in some ways hard to write in that you could not take me to those extremes. But they always grounded the episode, and Man-at-Arms' loyalty to the Addams family was, I think, admirable to say.
Man-at-Arms, Tila's father, was kind of the wise and wizened kind of elderly character who had been around, seen it all, kind of short-tempered. He was a great foil for Orko. I remember Man-at-Arms best as my foil for Orko. When I wanted to have Orko do some damage and have somebody pissed off, Man-at-Arms was the perfect foil. And that's how I used him most often. In talking about Cringer and Battle Cat, it's always fun in cartoons to write animals. And I think one of the things that made He-Man so successful was the comedy aspect, and there was always comedy. And probably Cringer, as much as any, it was really fun to write the cowardly character. And I think that's something that not only all kids, but all human beings can relate to. We can all relate to being frightened. And Cringer took it to such an extreme, and yet the contrast between the extreme cowardice and the bravery and power that the character had after transforming, I think, was very primal for kids. I think the whole transforming from weakness to power is a huge part of the appeal of He-Man.
My goal was always to get Cringer into Battle Cat mode as fast as humanly possible. Because I know cats. I have cats, and he's no cat. They're majestic, they're regal. Cringer has been disowned by every cat species in the known universe. He can be very funny at times as a talking cat, which of course all cats can. This is not widely known because they keep it to themselves. They can talk, they have credit cards and driver's licenses. We just don't see them, that's all. Cringer, I never really knew what to do with him. So making Battle Cat, or at least there he had like a funny comment because he looked so tough, it was comic. Whereas Cringer being funny, looking funny, wasn't funny. If everything is funny, nothing is funny. You want the contrast. Battle Cat gave you the contrast, Cringer gave you the willies.
All that water bouncing up and down, up and down. Oh, I think I'm seasick already.
Cringer, we're still in the dock.
Well, let's keep it that way, shall we?
I enjoyed, for the most part, writing dialogue for Cringer as opposed to Battle Cat. Because, well, for one thing, during the entire time I was on the show, there was this ongoing debate as to whether or not Cringer could talk. Cringer and Battle Cat could talk. And then when I was writing the first episode that I wrote, they were adamant that neither of them can talk. The cats don't talk. They can't talk. And I remember sitting in the office one time when somebody pointed out, I was sitting in an author's office, and somebody pointed out, well, but, you know, in the transformation sequence, Battle Cat says, I have the power too. And Arthur looks shocked and he said, it does? Well, yeah. Well, then I guess Battle Cat can talk.
Oh no, not again!
Thinking back on the He-Man series, I still feel they could have done more with the He-Man character in terms of the relationship with Cringer. I always thought that the Cringer He-Man dynamic was a little too what you expected it to be. I felt there was a real opportunity for teaching children the value of an adult, a very strong, heroic adult, and its relationship with animals. And that seemed to be missing from that. And I always wished it would have used to talk about that. But it'd be good to get that kind of thing where you really, to teach kids to treat animals well. I don't mean to be preaching here or anything, but that seems like something people don't really do significantly now. And that was a real good opportunity because his sidekick was an animal. Cringer/Battle Cat was as important to what happened in the action as He-Man, and it would be good to explore that dynamic more instead of it just being like an ersatz human being.
Sorceress was sort of a mystical character, and I personally felt she should not be a character that was overused. I felt she should be a special character that we should try not to go to too often because, you know, any character that's got too much power and too much knowledge hurts your storytelling because, you know, you're always trying to put the protagonist up against obstacles, and the sorceress was too easy an out to solve problems. So I tried to stay away from the sorceress.
I kind of liked Evelyn because she was just more interesting. Her dialogue was more fun, and she was a bit catty. You know, Sorceress was just this goody two-shoes kind of for me. She was a bit of a, you know, the fairy godmother. I didn't have a lot of episodes with her. She just seemed to make sort of visitations and bless everybody and then disappear.
You won't get away with this for long. I'll make you all pay. This was my chance, the big chance I waited for. I will beat you yet, He-Man.
Skeletor is the lead villain. Every kid needs to have the bejeebers scared out of him, and I guess that was his function. The evil personality in the show and stuff.
Skeletor was interesting in that in Europe and in Southern Africa, that skeleton figure did not sit well with a lot of people, but he was a very effective villain. And in fact, I think frequently the artists have the most fun with the villains because they can create these bizarre creatures and make them do bizarre things, and they're fun that way.
Of all the characters that I wrote for, probably Skeletor was my favorite because I could take him places with annoyance at the world around him that the other characters would not allow to go because they were the good guys. He could almost perceive the absurdity of his situation and comment on it in ways that you or I probably would do. And that irritability made him just fun to write for.
Never. Give me that magic staff of yours.
Yes, only one is really me. Which one is it, He-Man?
I understood Skeletor. I understood what Skeletor's issues were, and I wrote that for Skeletor.
Villains are naturally funny to me. The whole idea of villainy is sort of a comedy of manners to me. I remember back in high school, the really bad kids seemed funny to me. They got me beat up a lot, but they seemed funny to me. And when I became a bad kid, I aped them. And I was all about things that later became, go ahead, make my day. Villains are funny people.
Skeletor was like maybe the coolest villain ever. Except that he wasn't allowed to do anything because of the nature of the show. Skeletor should have been the coolest villain ever. I mean, he looks great, and he's like the Crimson Ghost from the old serial. I don't know if you've ever seen the Old Republic series, but there's one called the Crimson Ghost, which is a guy in a hood with wearing a skull mask over his face. Well, they took that, they made it look really cool. He's got these great Doctor Doom proportions to his cowl that he wears. And he was really a bad guy. I mean, he was a true bad guy.
Well, he needs a good skincare professional. Definitely, Skeletor needs some dermatological help. He treats himself very seriously. He needs to lighten up. I tended to like characters who were more conflicted, and because often, even what I'm writing nowadays, I'll often turn and twist and have villains become heroic, and vice versa. I'll play a lot of moral ambiguity. And so I would have probably taken him a lot farther in those ways if I had had my druthers.
I would say Skeletor was my favorite He-Man character because he had the most range. You could almost understand how he felt sometimes. You know, you have this annoying muscle boy there. It just must have driven somebody crazy. You could actually feel for this character.
I didn't like drawing Skeletor so much. See, I based my judgments on who I like to draw, and Skeletor was just a bag of bones to me, so with a hood. And so you couldn't do a lot of acting with his face. He wasn't as much fun. But I used to really do a lot of facial acting in my boards, so the characters that actually had features made it easier.
I liked Skeletor. I thought, you know, there was always a lot of... This, by the way, is... You keep calling it bubble bath. I think it's shampoo. I believe it's shampoo, and I have a Darth Vader at home, and they talk to each other. You know, they're always cutting up old touches. I like Skeletor. I thought he was really interesting. You know, he was a bad guy, but there were things that he wanted. I want Eternia. You know, he's not just bad because he's bad. He's bad because he wants something. Now, I don't know. I didn't see all the He-Man episodes, so I don't know if we know why he's bad or why he wants Eternia. And see, now if I were writing He-Man today, I would ask those questions. I would say, let's do an episode about why Skeletor is the way he is. But I liked him. I think he had a good look. He was a very scary character, but that skull...
It was her idea, Skeletor.
Quiet! I have a job for you two.
He had that great voice, and always the laughing and the cackling, and he could do the magic, and he had all these strange helpers, you know, some of whom were even odder than he was, and seemed pretty funny themselves. They were almost like comedy relief characters. They were the Orko on the other side.
Evelyn, you knew she was smarter than Skeletor, and one of these days she's going to take over the company, but she never... You also hoped that there was something going on between Skeletor and Evelyn, but I don't know. And the other villains were, every once in a while they'd appear one or two shows. Beastman and the other guys, they were just funny looking.
You had two massive characters, and they dominated the show. And those subsidiary villains were only just, they're just around to fill up space.
You have to wonder about a guy who is in theory your mastermind of all evil things, who hires the Three Stooges to work for him. They were having a sale one day on henchmen, and these guys were marked down, way down, and he only had $3 to spend, it was $1 each, and there they were. I played them the only way you can play them, which is for humor. Larry took Evelyn more seriously than I ever could. Beastman to me was just a chance to whenever possible, have really dumb, humorous things happening.
Our plan is working better than we thought.
Because you look at him and you think, I can't take him seriously. Much as I love the cartoon, this guy is a goof. So I wrote him accordingly.
Then we will spring our trap.
Paul Dini also, I think he had a little dark side to him. He was always, he had a crush on Evelyn. Paul Dini had a crush on Evelyn. He thought that she was hot. I think that's because he liked Joan Jett.
Why is Evelyn in this cave with Skeletor? What's her connection to him? You know, like, why isn't she off, you know, being a villainess on her own?
Evelyn was like sort of like your the wicked girl, the mean girl down the block, and she was hung out in bad company, like with Beastman and Skeletor, and she was fun, and she was a wild lady.
I think I liked Manny Faces just because it's a silly name. Like, we loved names with puns. You know, it was always Clawful, Manny Faces, Triclops, like that.
I think my favorite characters to write for in the show were probably the bad guy, mostly Evelyn and Skeletor, because they were two bad guys that weren't defined by just one note. Beastman was sort of like, we knew what he was about. The others were just sort of defined by what they were sold as. But Skeletor you can have some fun with because he can come up with nefarious deeds. I always thought of Evelyn as, every time I would write the show before it aired and I saw it, when I wrote the episodes, I always heard June Foray in my head doing Evelyn. Come on, Skeletor, darling, that kind of thing. Because that's how she struck me as a real sort of femme fatale sort of character. And it was fun to write them that way. So I think that they were probably the ones I had the most fun with. That and the banter between Skeletor and He-Man, because Skeletor could banter rings around He-Man, even if he wasn't being, comical.
You won't believe this because he's such a good actor, but Orko was like an unbelievable prima donna. Absolutely unbelievable prima donna. Nobody could control him. It was usually chaos over in the animation department. And he had dialogue approval. He would say this, only draw me from my left side. My left side is my good side. And I'm thinking, you have no face. He doesn't, there he is. He's right there. Does he have a face? He's got a, you're wearing the scarf, dude. What do you mean your left side is your good side? Jeez. And then he'd go off in his trailer and he'd get, and it's for his egg white omelet, and he'd have to have the champagne spritzers and what, it's I don't deal with people like that anymore. I'm too old and too rich for that.
Jim Logan was a career assistant animator, an animator who had a very long pedigree in animation. He had worked at the Terry Toons and famous Paramount Studios on Popeyes in the 40s and all. He was like one of the first professional animators I had met, so that I'd wanted to emulate. But what's fun about Jim is that Jim had a very low-key sense of humor. And Jim couldn't be bothered to memorize the names of all the characters because there were so many, so he made up his own names. So he started to just call them whatever he felt like calling them. So he'd come into you with a problem, and he'd say, "Oh, Tom," like Merman, he called him Fishman, and Beastman, he was Dogman, and Skeletor was Bone Man. So he'd say, "Well, Tom, it says here, Fishman goes over to Dogman, and then Dogman and Fishman attack He-Man because Bone Man told them to." And I said, Joe, I said, Jim, I like that. I want to see that show made too. I think that's a pretty good show,
And the Masters of the Universe.
When She-Ra was going to come on to the scene, my dad came to me and asked me to write a song that would help introduce She-Ra and He-Man together. And it was a very exciting challenge for me. First of all, I was really scared. It's like, oh my gosh. But since I knew the character so well, I felt it wasn't inappropriate for me to give it a stab. And one of the things that was just so apparent about this show was the show was very empowering to young people. And He-Man said, "I have the power." And that just leapt out as the song. The song is "I Have the Power," and it's the power of their meeting, finding each other, a brother and sister, although it's full of love and stuff, but it's a brother and sister meeting, and they're gonna join forces and help save the world. And they get together and say, "I have the power." And any He-Man fan will know "I have the power" says it all when it comes to He-Man and She-Ra. And that was an incredible opportunity and a lot of fun. In terms of the actual production of the song, I was singing the She-Ra part. And we had another studio singer who was singing the He-Man part. John Irwin really didn't sing the song. He's not a real singer. So She-Ra didn't sing it. That's sort of our little, we slid that in where we took the artistic liberty that I could sing the song, and fellow by the name of Noam sang the part of He-Man. One of the things that was really amazing in getting this music video done, I never would have been able to do it without my co-conspirator in this, Brett Heisey, who literally directed the video. And it was one of those things like any Filmation production. You use what you have and you get really inventive with being creative and doing things with next to nothing and making magic out of it. So I really can't say enough about the miracle that Brett Heisey did on pulling off this music video. Without him, it just couldn't have happened. Never really seen before, music video that gets to be unveiled. A lot of fun, one of those labors of love that nobody thought we'd really get away with, but we managed to do that, and hopefully everybody will get a chance to see it now and enjoy, and y'all can have the power.
time has come for you to seek your destiny. Let your heart guide you toward the path that you know to be right. And let this sword give you the strength to follow that path.
Somewhere out there, someone needs me. I don't know how or where, but believe me, I'll walk the universe to find her, for better or for worse, beside her, for the honor of love, by the power above. I have the power. I have the power. A stranger walked into my world, and when he talked, I really heard. He spoke of things like love and peace. The joy it brings will never cease. For the honor of love, by the power of love, I have the power. I have the power. The truth of love is here to guide me. The strength of love is here beside me. Forevermore we'll be together. Our hearts will soar one to the other. The truth of love will always guide us. The strength above will be inside us. Forevermore we'll be together. Our hearts will soar one to the other. For the honor of love, by the power above, we have the power. We have the power, so can you.
In today's story, Elena tried taking a magic potion which she thought would help her. Well, she found out there aren't any magic potions. And you know what? There aren't any magic drugs either. Anytime you take one from anybody but your parents or your doctor, you're taking a very big chance. You're gambling with your health, maybe even your life. Drugs don't make your problems go away. They just create more.
In today's story, the beautiful voice of Celeste kept the evil Yogg from making all sorts of bad things happen. Now, I can't promise that a song will make any magic for you, but I can promise that when you're feeling lonely or sad, and we all do sometimes, if you try singing a song or maybe whistling or maybe just smiling, you'll feel a lot better. Honest. Try it and see. And I'll be seeing you very soon. Bye now.
Hovar and Justin certainly had a narrow escape, didn't they? But when one is an explorer or a scientist like Hovar, wild animals are only one of the many dangers you face. And yet, throughout the course of history, there have been brave men and heroic women ready and eager to be the first to face the unknown, to challenge its dangers so that others might follow without fear. It is to these unsung heroes that we owe so much. See you soon with another exciting adventure.
Today we saw people fighting over the Star Child, but in the end, her power brought these people together. It might surprise you to know that all of us have a power like the Star Child's. You can't see it or touch it, but you can feel it. It's called love. When you care deeply about others, when you're kind and gentle, then you're using the power. And that's very special magic indeed. Until later, goodbye for now.
There are times when everybody dreams of becoming very rich or powerful, but what they don't think about are the problems and responsibilities that go with it. In today's story, He-Man was tested, and he proved his worth when he was able to resist the temptation to use his great power for any selfish gain. He knew that it's just as important to know when not to use force as it is to know when to use it.
A very long time ago, a wonderful document came into being. It was called the Magna Carta.
It was the first big step in recognizing that all people were created equal. That even though more laws have been passed to guarantee that, there are still those who try to keep others from being free.
Fortunately, Queen Samana realized in time that only by working together could her city be saved. And that's the way it should be. Together. Right?
Right.
In today's story, I sure was busy. Boy, did that hurt. Ramming things may look like fun, but it really isn't. Trying to use your head the way I do is not only dangerous, it's dumb. I mean, you could get hurt badly. So listen to Rami, play safely, and when you use your head, use it the way it was meant to be used, to think. Until later, so long.
Manny, could you help me with a problem?
Sure, Orko.
I can never remember anything. How do actors learn their speeches?
By rehearsing, we practice saying them again and again. Well, that's what you have to do. If you're trying to remember something from school, say it to yourself over and over again. Rehearse it in your mind just like an actor.
Say goodbye, say goodbye, say goodbye.
What are you doing?
Oh, I'm trying to remember to say goodbye. Bye! It worked!
There was a really wonderful moment in today's adventure story.
Bet I can guess what it was. It was when He-Man brought the water out of the lake.
No, that wasn't it.
Well then, it must have been when He-Man lifted the whole top of the mountain.
That was incredible, but that wasn't it either.
Well, I give up.
The most wonderful moment was when Thad realized he must face his own responsibilities. In that one tiny second, I saw a boy grow into a man.